to The Book of Life, a show about Jewish people and the books we read. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. In this September 2006 episode of our podcast, we celebrate new beginnings. We'll get ready for the Jewish New Year with Rahel Musleah, author of Apples and Pomegranates, a guide for creating a Rosh Hashanah Seder. We'll speak to Ken Gordon of jbooks.com about that website and about the new relationship between JBooks and our own podcast. We'll hear from Brenda Ferber, a first-time author whose book Julia's Kitchen is all about starting over from scratch. And of course, we celebrate our new sponsorship from the Association of Jewish Libraries. So roll up your sleeves and get ready to turn over a new leaf. Rahel Musleah is originally from Calcutta, India, and she traces her family's roots back to 17th century Baghdad. She is a Jewish educator, singer, writer, and storyteller, as well as an award-winning journalist. Her book, Apples and Pomegranates, a Family Seder for Rosh Hashanah, published by Carben, was recognized by the Association of Jewish Libraries as a notable children's book of Jewish content in 2004. We spoke to Rahel at her home in Great Neck, New York. Rahel, your book, Apples and Pomegranates, is basically a Haggadah for a Rosh Hashanah Seder. Can you tell us about this tradition?
Tradition of having a Rosh Hashanah Seder is actually a very old one, about 2,000 years. Jewish communities throughout the world, especially Sephardic and Mizrahi Oriental communities in the Middle East, incorporated this practice into a Seder.
What are some of the special symbols of the food in the Rosh Hashanah Seder?
Just as in Ashkenazic homes, the apple symbolizes the hope for a sweet new year. We have it in an apple preserve, cooked and spiced with cloves. Some of the foods are used because of their properties. The pomegranate, because of the traditional interpretation that there are 613 seeds in a pomegranate, and we hope that our year should be as filled with mitzvot, with good deeds, as the pomegranate is filled with seeds. And I actually once counted the seeds in a pomegranate, and it's not an old wives' tale or a rabbi's tale that I got 612 seeds. But then there are also foods based on puns on their Hebrew names. For instance, the date, the Hebrew name is Tamar, and the blessing is Sheyitamu Oivenu V'chol Mevakshei Ratenu. Tamar and Yitamu, that's upon the connection between the sounds of those words, that enmity should end.
Can you tell us about your own family's Rosh Hashanah Seders when you were growing up?
The good thing is that we start with the food and that it's only about a 20-minute ceremony. We get dates and we split them and stuff them with a walnut. It cuts the sweetness a little bit because dates are really very powerfully sweet. We separated all the seeds in the pomegranate and put them in a dish so that you don't have a lot of splattering at the table. And we used to have a sheep's head for the wish that we should be heads and not tails, leaders and not followers. But when we came to the United States from Calcutta, the first year my mother did manage to find, I guess it's called sweetbreads, but we didn't know too much about refrigeration in those days, and it was really kind of gross. So we haven't used that anymore, and I'm a vegetarian for many years anyway, so you can substitute a head of lettuce if you want to have that wish. The sweet things kind of alternate with the not-so-sweet foods, and that's how life is, bittersweet.
Rahel, you are also a musician. Can you tell us about your CD, Hodu?
I would love to tell you about my CD. These are some of the songs that I grew up singing around the Shabbat or holiday table. The music is basically the Baghdadi tradition that was transplanted in India. And of course, I was raised mostly in the United States, so there aren't as many quarter tones in my voice as there are in my father's. The accompaniment that's on the CD is traditional Middle Eastern instruments, an oud and a kanun, which is a kind of stringed instrument, and percussion and a violin. I kind of struggle with being raised mostly in the United States and having two children born and raised here. How do you try to maintain as much as possible when the world is really so different? So the CD, the Rosh Hashanah Seder, these are all very joyous, yet traditional, yet contemporary ways of continuing the customs that are very, very important, the music that's so key to our heritage, and that can also bring joy to other people's homes and lives, no matter what your background or heritage is.
Rahel, I want to wish you a Shana Tova, and thank you for speaking with us.
Shana Tova, as we say in our tradition, Tizku Shanim Rabot, may you merit many years.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Ken Gordon is the editor of jbooks.com, a website created by Jewish Family and Life. This online destination features information on books of Jewish interest with reviews, interviews, news, and more. As of September, jbooks.com will feature the Book of Life podcast on their webpage, with links back to our website at jewishbooks.blogspot.com. We spoke to Ken at his home in Newton, Massachusetts. Ken, what is jbooks.com?
JBooks.com is an online Jewish book community, a place where people could come to find out about Jewish fiction, nonfiction, children's books, and other types of Jewish literature. The idea is to promote Jewish literacy in the broadest sense.
What sorts of things can readers expect to find on the JBooks website?
We have all sorts of things, Eva Allman, Tova Mervis, and Joan Legant. We also run book reviews, and we even have musical book reviews. We once ran an illustrated essay about the Jewish graphic novel, things like that.
What's a musical book review? You sing the book review?
Yes, there are actually songs that do the work of book reviews.
That sounds like fun. Who does the singing?
A friend of mine. I write the music, and my friend sings, and her husband does all the musical production. We are called the Penny Arcade Players together.
That's great.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some more about the illustrated essay you had on the Jewish graphic novels?
It's by David Gantz, who is a veteran cartoonist. It's constructed in a series of panels with David Gantz himself leading the reader through this great, rich history of Jewish visual narratives. David just did a phenomenal job. It's just an amazing work of cultural history and autobiography and cartooning all thrown in together. And he's been around for so long, and he knew all the great cartooning people like Stan Lee and the guys from Mad Magazine like Al Jaffe. He worked and was friends with these guys. So he has some terrific anecdotes and a real insider's perspective to how we got to where we are with the Jewish graphic novel.
I assume you will be updating the site for the fall holidays. What do you look for in a good holiday article?
Well, we look for something that is both literary and sort of thematically appropriate. We did a wonderful short story by Edgar Keret, the superlative Israeli fiction writer, last year about atonement, which was just right on. It really struck a very strong major seventh chord with our readers. We're going to be doing a number of pieces based on a forthcoming book by David Mamet called The Wicked Son, Anti-Semitism, Self-Hatred, and the Jews. It's a very powerful and provocative book.
Now, JBooks goes beyond just reviewing books. Can you tell us about the Keret Awards?
Yeah, we are part of the Keret International Jewish Book Awards. The awards this year are being administered by Jewish Family and Life Media, which is the company that puts out jbooks.com. And one of the very interesting things we're doing this year is we are running the jbooks.com People's Choice Award for the best work of fiction in the last 10 years. After Labor Day, people will be able to go to jbooks.com and vote for their favorite.
Can you talk a little about JBooks' new partnership with the Book of Life podcast?
Yeah, we really like what you're doing, Heidi, and we were thinking that it might make sense to put this on our site. The podcasting is an interesting new phenomenon, and our readers would like to know more about it. So it'll be on the front page, prominently featured in the right-hand column. If people are looking for it, they should go to jbooks.com, and it should smack them right in the eyes.
Excellent. Ken Gordon, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Heidi.
Novellas translated from the German about two women who were sad but quite determined. Our leading ladies, they suffer so in these dramatic transatlantic tales of woe.
Honeymoon's heroes, honeymoon's heroes.
Brenda Ferber won the 2004 Sydney Taylor Manuscript Award for her book Julia's Kitchen. Farrar Straus-Giroux took notice, and the book was published in 2006. It's the story of Kara, whose house catches fire from a short in the toaster oven and burns down while she's at a sleepover. Only her dad survives, and he and Kara struggle with loss, with God, and with each other on their way towards healing. It's a warm and sensitive book and requires a good-sized box of Kleenex. We spoke to Brenda at her home in Deerfield, Illinois. Brenda, tell us about Julia's Kitchen.
It's a story of a girl named Kara Siegel. She's 11 years old, and she's sleeping over at her best friend's house when there's a fire at her house, and her mom and sister die in the fire. Her dad gets out. It's really the story of how she deals with that grief and how she reestablishes her relationship with her dad, and probably most of all, how she loses her faith in God and then finds it in a new way. It's all about how you deal with the bad stuff that happens in life. It was very important to me to make it be a Jewish book because I think Judaism has such a beautiful way of handling grief and loss and mourning, and there's so many traditions and customs that really help people get through difficult times.
Can you talk about Kara's attitude toward God and how it changes during the story?
Well, at the beginning of the story, she feels that she has a very close relationship with God, and Kara is a big worrier and thinks that God is listening to all of her worries, making sure nothing bad happens to her. So then when something terrible does happen, it throws her for a loop because it doesn't make sense with what her idea of God is. So she feels angry at God and abandoned by him. Eventually she comes to find a different way of thinking about God, and she sees more that maybe he doesn't come in and prevent tragedies from happening, and that he's there to give people strength and to cheer people on and to hope for people, but he can't really come in like a superhero and solve problems and prevent tragedies.
This is a very serious theme for a children's book. What inspired you to create this story?
There was a fire in a house in our neighborhood, and a father and son actually died in the fire. And to make matters worse, the mom had died a year earlier in a car accident. And so there were these two boys that were the only survivors of this family, and they went to go live with relatives. Although I didn't know the family, every day as I would drive past the house, I would think about the boys and wonder how they were coping. And then I started to wonder, what if they thought that God protected them from bad things happening, and then how would they explain God now? And this was also the same time as 9/11. And so it just seemed that everyone was sort of walking around with this fear. And it made me think a lot about the way I was as a child. And I did worry about people dying as a kid. And I'm actually a very happy, optimistic sort of person. But I had this side to myself, and I think that a lot of kids do.
What has been the reaction to the book?
It's been an amazing experience. I had one little girl who wrote me a letter while she was still in the middle of the book, and she wrote how much she loved the book, and it was the best thing she'd ever read. And then she wrote me another letter when she finished the book saying she loved it so much she passed it on to her best friend, and now it's her best friend's favorite book too. And then I heard that this girl got hit by a car shortly after this.
Oh my God.
And she was fine. She wasn't hurt at all, but it just made me think, oh my God, what if something bad had happened to her? I just wonder, how her reading that book might have impacted her experience of getting hit by a car and, how she thought about that.
Wow.
That was pretty crazy.
Has the tragic theme upset any readers?
I haven't heard that. I have heard from some adults who have said, I can't read a book like that. I think kids don't freak out about reading this stuff as much as adults would think they would. Kids, I think when they read things like this, they learn and they grow from it, and if, God forbid, a kid really had to deal with something like this in their real life, I would hope that by reading the book they would maybe have a little bit more emotional preparation for that. I mean, everyone deals with loss at some point in their life, so why not think about it? Why not talk about it?
I have to tell you that ever since I read Julia's Kitchen, I have been unplugging my toaster oven when I'm not using it.
It definitely has had that effect on people.
So it is true that a serious fire can start from a toaster oven?
It is true. However, it is extremely unlikely. It is kind of like getting struck by lightning. The firefighter that I interviewed for writing the book did tell me about a fire that started that way. And that was really how I came up with it, because I wanted to make sure that the fire in the book was started by a complete accident. I asked the firefighter, explain something that would be completely blameless, a total random act that would result in a fire like this. He said, a toaster oven. I said, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, you're supposed to unplug your toaster oven when you're not using it. And I was
like you are. I didn't know that. I had never heard that. I thought, well, that's perfect for my book.
I think you're keeping a lot of people safe because everybody who reads it starts unplugging their toaster oven.
It's true.
Brenda, you won the Sydney Taylor Manuscript Award for this book before it was even published. Can you tell us about that?
That was a fantastic experience. I hadn't even heard about the award until 2 weeks before the deadline. And I know because I won the award, things went much quicker at the publisher. And I didn't get any rejection letters for this manuscript. The first place I sent it to got it, which was pretty much a miracle, I thought.
Brenda Ferber, thanks for speaking with us about Julia's Kitchen.
Thank you so much for having me, Heidi.
If you'd like to share a page from your own book of life, or to express your opinion on our show about a particular book, CD, or video owned by the Feldman Library, email me, Heidi Estrin, at heidi@cbimboca.org, or call our listener comment line at 206-888-2657. Just so you know, this is not a toll-free number. The Book of Life is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries, promoting Jewish reading by supporting Judaic libraries and librarians. Visit them on the web at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilich Makers Klezmer String Band from Sacramento, California, whose CDs feature upbeat music from the Ashkenazic and Sephardic traditions with Brazilian, Gypsy, and Celtic influences. Borrow their CDs at the Feldman Library or buy your own copies at freilichmakers.com. To download episodes of the Book of Life podcast, visit us on the web at jewishbooks.blogspot.com. That's jewishbooks, one word, blogspot.com. Links to the books and CDs mentioned on the show are available on this website. Thanks for listening, and happy reading!